Hello, everyone. This is Kim Marie and Leroy. Welcome to our free class on Venus Retrograde in Gemini. And in case you're not aware of it, Venus went retrograde today at 8:33 a.m. Mountain Time, and it did it at basically 24 degrees Gemini. I'm going to go through a lot of information in regards to the Venus aspects over this call, but I want you to know I will do the same thing that I did on the class on Mars retrograde in Virgo. I will put all these aspects in an email and get them off to you most likely tomorrow. So what we are going to look at here over the next 90 minutes or so is we're going to briefly talk about the retrograde principle in general. We're going to talk about the archetype of Venus, Venus retrograde, and then Venus retrograde in Gemini. And we'll finish up with the various aspects that Venus retrograde is going to do. Basically, it will have 5 different planets that it makes aspects to. Mars twice, 4 other planets it does 3 times. Direct, retrograde, direct. But let's start at the beginning. First of all, just in case anybody is not familiar with what retrograde means, it is the apparent motion of the planets appearing to go backwards through the zodiac. Or if we are watching it in the evening sky, if we would watch it every single night and mark that point in the sky, it would be as though it appeared to make a path in the sky as if it was a letter S, going direct, slowing down, stopping, then appearing to go backwards before it slows down, stops, and goes forward again. Now, this appearance of retrograde is a geocentric phenomena, meaning that it is from our viewpoint here on Earth. We probably all know from basic astronomy that all of the planets, including Earth, revolve around the sun. That's the heliocentric universe. But from our perspective here on Earth, these planets have a changing pattern. And so when a planet goes retrograde, any planetary archetype, this will be Mercury, Venus, Mars, all the way out to Pluto, that retrograde planet accelerates the evolutionary momentum within the soul. A retrograde planet accelerates the process of individuation. So anybody born with a planet retrograde natally, that breaking free and individualizing that planetary archetype is going to be active for them this entire lifetime. As we experience planetary retrogrades by transit in the sky, just as we are right now with Venus, then during the time period of that retrograde, all of us are experiencing that planetary archetype in its process of individualizing and accelerating the growth within our soul according to that planetary archetype. Now with Venus, this is going to be the archetype of self-reliance. It's going to cover the whole scheme of things in regards to relating and relationships. Venus rules 2 signs. Its rulership of Taurus is the inner relationship each of us have with ourselves, the essential needs that we determine we want in our life and in the inward relationship with ourselves. Venus rulership of Libra, it will then also encompass the outer relationships with the rest of the world, one-on-one, individually, collectively, the whole spectrum of relating. Countries have relationships with each other. Now, many of us are familiar that when we're dealing with a planetary retrograde, we use all the re-words. We review, we rebel, reject, we retreat. Retrogrades will turn us inward because we're trying to ponder over something, just throw things off from the past. Also, generically, retrogrades will make us feel as though we are different. It can promote a sense of alienation. Not just Uranus retrograde or Venus retrograde. I'm different than everybody else. No one relates to me. But retrogrades in general can bring this sense of feeling different, feeling alienated. When we have a retrograde planet natally, we can re-experience or re-meet people, situations, patterns, events that we experienced in past lives. And what that natal retrograde symbolizes then is something with that planetary archetype, that aspect of consciousness within the soul. The lessons were not learned. So there's a need to redo it in order to learn the lesson. So a natal planet retrograde will emphasize that something was resisted, something wasn't completed, something wasn't finished. At the same time, it will emphasize the need to throw off, to accelerate that planetary archetype. Retrograde planets, natal and by transit, are always trying to break down the barrier within the soul between what is conscious and what is unconscious. Specifically, what is unconscious for each of us on an individual basis. So when we look at this archetype of Venus, again, Venus kind of is a dual archetype. Inner side of Venus with its rulership of Taurus, second house. Outer side of Venus with its rulership of Libra and the seventh house. So Venus is always going to be about the inner relationship we have with ourselves, what we determine we value. And our values create what we determine we need, and those needs create desires that we want to go off and achieve, manifest. So Venus is going to have to do with self-love, self-acceptance, self-understanding. We must have a relationship with ourself first before it can reflect outer and relate to another. With Venus's rulership of Libra, seventh house, and the outer relating, it will bring in this phenomena in psychology that we call the psychology of listening. Being able to actually hear what another person says. That will also entail the ability to be heard by someone else. So when we experience a Venus retrograde, all of these components to the archetype of Venus come up for review. I want to throw off what's not working anymore. Let me just mention this too. I'll get into this in more detail, but rather than making you wait so long, okay? Venus entered its shadow April 11th. That's when Venus first passed over 7.5 degrees Gemini. That's the spot where Venus will actually go direct on June 27th. So Venus entered its shadow April 11th. From April 11th to May 15th, we've had Venus direct